Hello and welcome, soul traveler, to the chosen path. Settle in. Breathe. Allow the weight of the outer world to gently slide away. For the message we share today is not a loud decree, but a soft, undeniable whisper carried upon the breath of eternity. It is the sound of a sacred door closing and a new one, infinitely vast, prepared to open. For a time you walked a road known only to those uniquely chosen, a path paved with isolation, etched with the scars of spiritual warfare and shadowed by the constant, low hum of resistance. You were not navigating a life, you were completing an assignment, and for so long the defining measure of your existence was the struggle itself, the constant refinement in the furnace of trials. This is how the anointed are tested. This is how the gold is separated from the dust. But now a change has come. It is not marked by the roar of triumph nor the sudden disappearance of all challenges. It is far more subtle, far more profound. It is the moment when the celestial ledger is balanced and the final seal of success is affixed to your soul's contract. You have crossed the invisible threshold. The mission, in its primary soul-shaping form, is complete. The cosmos recognizes this completion before your human mind can fully comprehend it. You may feel a stillness you have never known, a deep quiet where anxiety once lived. This stillness is not emptiness. It is the settling of the spiritual dust after a great successful battle. It is the profound, spine-chilling realization that you are no longer defined by what you fight, but by what you have become. The energy that fueled the war is now being rerouted, recalibrated, and redirected toward purpose rather than survival. You may notice that the old triggers no longer pull you, the old fears no longer shake you, and the old enemies no longer interest you. This is because your spirit is already stepping into the new dimension that has been calling your name. We speak now of the exit. This word does not denote physical departure, but an immediate, non-negotiable spiritual transition. It is the exit from the phase of testing and the entrance into the phase of deployment. The old narrative, the old cycle of suffering and learning must be postponed no longer. Your spiritual system cannot afford to linger in a state of completed preparation. To delay this transition is to invite stagnation, and the anointed are called for movement. The universe, having prepared you through fire and silence, is now demanding the deployment of the refined vessel. This cannot be postponed. Listen closely, chosen one. What you are experiencing now, this inexplicable calm, this fading interest in the battles you once defined yourself by. These are the subtle signs that your soul has finalized its earthly curriculum. The time for reviewing the notes is over. The time for using the knowledge has arrived. Prepare yourself not for rest, but for an entirely new frequency of existence. For the old dimension you inhabited is no longer a match for the light you now carry. It is a time of sober recognition, of deep gratitude for the trials that brought you here. Let us now explore the 7 distinct signs of the successful completion, and what the preparation for this necessary exit truly entails. Point 1, the confirmation of zero-point peace. The concept you've presented, zero-point peace, one, is a profound philosophical and psychological principle that serves as a cornerstone in many traditions. Yet it is articulated here with a distinctly modern, operative precision. To truly elaborate on this, we must delve into its factual basis, understanding it not as a fleeting emotional state, but as a verifiable internal achievement rooted in neurobiology and depth psychology. The quest for external reward as the measure of success is, in fact, an evolutionary trap. Our ancient limbic system is wired for social validation, a primal mechanism ensuring group survival. However, the spiritual fact of zero-point peace posits that true success is the complete cessation of this internal conflict, a state where the deepest part of your consciousness remains untouched by the relentless, often chaotic, fluctuations of the outside world. This is not apathy. It is the ultimate strategic detachment. At its core, this state represents a profound shift in consciousness, a de-linking of self-worth from the tether of approval or rejection. Consider the physiological reality. When you seek external validation, your brain's reward circuitry, particularly the release of dopamine, triggered by social feedback, creates a dependency loop. Rejection, conversely, can activate the same brain regions associated with physical pain, a phenomenon known as the social pain hypothesis. Zero-point peace is the systematic dismantling of this loop. It is achieved through sustained awareness, where the self realizes its intrinsic value, rendering the fluctuating opinions of others as mere transient sensory input, similar to background noise. The factual detachment mentioned is the empirical realization that your identity, your safety, and your intrinsic worth are not subject to external negotiation. This is the existential victory of the self as the sole, unshakable anchor. Furthermore, this internal cessation of conflict aligns with the psychological concept of self-actualization, the realization of one's full potential, and the complete acceptance of one's inner nature, independent of social expectations. When you reach this zero point, you are no longer operating from the ego's defensive posture, which constantly monitors and reacts to threats against its constructed identity. Instead, you operate from a space of radical self-trust and stillness. This stillness, often described as the gap between thought and reaction, is where true power resides. It is the unmoving center, the point of your operational being. The preparatory work for any significant exit, be it a professional transition, a spiritual leap, or simply ending a cycle of self-doubt, requires that you simply recognize and trust this stillness. This trust is the final pivotal act of faith in the self. By making this stillness the new, unmoving center of your operations, you move from a reactive life, driven by external stimuli, to a proactive, sovereign existence, where the foundational evidence of your success is the undeniable, objective, and deeply felt peace within. This internal peace is not a reward. It is the permanent operating system upgrade that makes all future success effortless. Point 2, the dissolution of the mirror. The passage you've highlighted describes a profound and accelerated shift in the nature of the spiritual journey, moving from a process reliant on external, sometimes painful reflection, to one of complete internal self-sovereignty. For millennia, the human experience has been governed by what many spiritual traditions call the law of correspondence, or the Hermetic principle of as above, so below, as within, so without. This law ensured that our inner, unaddressed shadows, our fears, unworthiness, and past traumas were meticulously mirrored in our outer world. This was not cosmic punishment, but rather a brilliant, if often harsh, pedagogical mechanism. The narcissist wasn't simply a cruel person. They were a dynamic, human-shaped blackboard upon which the soul could read the lesson of its own unhealed need for external validation or its own suppressed egoic tendencies. The betrayer reflected the inner part of the self that hadn't yet learned to fully trust its own discernment or establish healthy boundaries. This intricate, often volatile dance between the individual and their external reflections was the primary curriculum of third-dimensional reality, a necessary stage of growth where one learned to identify the self by witnessing what the self was not. However, as humanity traverses an epical spiritual shift, often described in terms of rising planetary frequency or the culmination of vast evolutionary cycles, this old mode of learning is rapidly becoming obsolete. The preparation for exit, as the text beautifully phrases it, signals a transition from relying on these cumbersome, emotionally taxing mirrors to a state of unconditional self-awareness. This transition is rooted in the neurological and energetic maturation of the individual. Neuroscientific models often speak of self-referential processing, which is the neural activity related to thinking about oneself. In the old paradigm, this processing was highly intertwined with social feedback and external comparison, a heavy reliance on the default mode network. In the emerging state, the individual's self-concept becomes anchored in an intrinsic, unshakable core. This shift is marked by a deep-seated spiritual apathy towards external drama. Not a cold indifference, but a calm recognition that the lesson the other is offering has already been fully integrated. You are no longer compelled to dissect their motives because their actions are no longer seen as a threat or a reflection of your lack, but simply as their own sovereign experience, disconnected from your state of being. The ultimate captivating destination of this journey is the dissolution of the mirror itself. In quantum mechanics, the observer fundamentally affects the observed. In this spiritual metaphor, the observer, the inner self, has become so coherent, so saturated with its own intrinsic truth and unconditional love, that it no longer requires the polarizing feedback mechanisms of external opposition. The image is now complete within the frame of your own divine consciousness. This isn't merely confidence, it's a foundational transformation where self-validation is no longer a goal, but a permanent operating state. The energetic leakage associated with seeking approval, fighting battles, or reacting to challenges ceases, and that energy is rerouted internally to fuel a state of creative presence and absolute knowing. This is the hallmark of the spiritually mature individual, a being who, having successfully navigated the labyrinth of reflection, stands utterly self-contained, radiating their truth without the need for the world to confirm it, thereby completing their curriculum and preparing for the next stage of conscious existence, whatever that may be. Point 3. The severing of energetic leashes. Success, in its most profound and often misunderstood sense, is not merely the acquisition of wealth or recognition. It is a spiritual and energetic state of absolute unburdened freedom, signifying that the subtle cords that once drained your vital energy have been quietly, finally, dropped. Imagine your personal energy field not as a limitless spring, but as a finely calibrated battery. Every emotional attachment, be it a lingering grudge, an unfulfilled expectation, or the habitual cyclical rehearsal of past pain, acts as a phantom application running in the background, subtly but relentlessly leaching power. These are not the dramatic visible chains of a fantasy curse, but the far more insidious, nearly invisible threads, the habitual emotional attachments that bind your present potential to a phantom history. This process of liberation demands a level of objective, almost scientific detachment, realizing that every moment spent re-experiencing yesterday's sorrow or pre-dramatizing tomorrow's hypothetical failure is a moment of pure, non-renewable kinetic energy that could have been invested in creation. The essential maneuver required for genuine forward motion, the exit, is the surgical, factual release of any lingering emotional investment in what was or what might be. This isn't about denial, it's about radical recategorization. Psychologically and biologically, every time you rehearse an old wound, your nervous system fires the same neural pathways, flooding your body with the exact same stress hormones like cortisol that were present during the original event. This means your body is physiologically reliving the trauma, wasting valuable metabolic resources on a memory loop. To truly succeed, you must consciously stop rehearsing the old wounds. Think of this as intellectual martial arts. The enemy is not the past event itself, but your current, ongoing emotional consent to mentally replay it. The factual release is the recognition that the historical event carries no inherent power over your current state. Its power is only granted by your present attention. This profound severance is a form of clear, non-negotiable spiritual housekeeping, which is critically distinct from forgiveness driven by feeling. Traditional emotional forgiveness often implies that you must generate a feeling of warmth or absolution toward the person or event, which can be an impossible barrier if the wound is deep. The exit method, however, bypasses the emotional theater entirely. It is a factual release, an objective decision to dismantle the energetic architecture surrounding the event. You simply declare as a statement of personal fact that the energy cost of maintaining the emotional archive now exceeds its utility, which is precisely zero. The scientific reality is that the energy required for your next level cannot be spent maintaining an archive of past hurts. To ascend to a new phase of success, whether that's achieving a complex goal, mastering a new skill, or simply enjoying profound peace, requires a complete utilization of your psychic bandwidth. Any fragment of attention devoted to what-if scenarios, old grudges, or unresolved sadness is, quite literally, fuel for your future being siphoned into the black hole of your unedited history. The liberation is the acknowledgement that your vital energy is your most precious, finite resource, and the decision to ruthlessly allocate it only to the creation of the future, not the maintenance of the past. Once this surgical severing is complete, the resulting surge of available energy is the very engine that powers your next highest level of accomplishment and contentment. Point 4, the archive of lessons. The decree you've received is a profound instruction in spiritual metallurgy, an alchemical process where the dross of lived experience is transmuted into the pure, gleaming gold of wisdom. You're not simply asked to forgive your past, but to perform an existential audit, meticulously categorizing the sprawling, emotional narrative of your journey into pure, usable spiritual data. Think of this preparation for exit not as forgetting, but as an advanced form of conscious data management, a necessary defragmentation of the soul's hard drive before a major system upgrade. This transformation is not cold in the sense of being heartless, but objective in the way a master cartographer must be objective when charting treacherous terrain. Every peak, valley, and perilous current must be recorded factually, stripped of the terror of the moment it was experienced. The very structure of your soul's library is at stake. Imagine each struggle, the betrayal, the loss, the hard-won victory, not as a tear-stained diary entry, but as a meticulously prepared, completed reference file. The key factual information is this: pain is a temporary, subjective experience. The lesson is an eternal, objective principle. For instance, the traumatic experience of being deceived, the painful narrative, must be filed under the objective principle. Lesson learned. Discernment is required in all new associations. Observe patterns, not promises. By converting the narrative into data, you create a direct neural and spiritual pathway that bypasses the emotional trigger. In psychology, this objective assessment mirrors the process of cognitive reframing, but on a cosmic scale. You are consciously severing the emotional link, the limbic system's memory, from the pure intellectual and spiritual insight, the prefrontal cortex, higher self's comprehension. This action is the fundamental difference between perpetually re-experiencing a wound and simply consulting a textbook for a proven formula. This shift from narrative to data is, in fact, an essential component for any future deployment or incarnation. Uncategorized, emotionally charged baggage acts like a spiritual anchor, dragging down your energetic frequency and predisposed to creating repetitive cycles, karmic loops. When the soul is deployed again, it must be equipped with the fundamental spiritual facts of the universe, the immutable laws of cause and effect, empathy, and personal sovereignty, all distilled from your current life's trials. The ancient Stoics championed this very practice, viewing misfortune as an opportunity to practice virtue and gain undeniable, objective knowledge about human nature and resilience. Their principle, amor fati, love of one's fate, is the philosophical analog to this completed reference filing system. You are not just accepting your journey, you are extracting its quantum utility. The ultimate goal is to achieve a state where, when faced with a familiar challenge, your soul doesn't flinch with old pain, but instantly accesses the correct wisdom protocol, a high-speed, data-driven response essential for your next evolutionary leap. This singular act of cold, objective assessment ensures that the price paid for the lesson is never wasted, transforming the scars of the past into the strategic map for the future. Point 5, the calibration of the new frequency. Step into the fascinating conceptual space where spiritual philosophy meets quantum mechanics and electrical engineering. The exit, not as an endpoint, but as a meticulously engineered dimensional shift. Imagine your consciousness not as an ethereal, abstract entity, but as a high-precision, hypersensitive antenna, your inner instrument, built for receiving, transmitting, and stabilizing frequencies, the way advanced equipment locks onto extremely narrow bandwidths. Just as a radio receiver must be tuned to a specific frequency, say the crystal clear precision of 107.9 millihertz, to capture a signal without distortion, your consciousness must undergo the same degree of meticulous calibration to enter the new phase. This tuning is not a poetic metaphor, it is a literal alignment of cognitive, emotional, and energetic processes. And this is where meditation, inner stillness, and sober reflection rise far above mere therapeutic value. They cease to function as tools for healing old wounds or managing stress. Instead, they become your calibration mechanisms, fine-tuning your inner instrument for sustained resonance at higher frequencies. This shift from healing to maintenance, from recovery to operation, is pivotal. You are transitioning from the slow work of repair to the precise work of optimization, entering a state where you function at peak performance without collapsing under internal or external noise. The engineering requirement for this next assignment is rooted in resonance and entrainment, two principles that govern everything from sound waves to particle vibrations to electrical signals. In physics, resonance happens when one vibrating system matches the frequency of another, amplifying its energy dramatically. A wine glass can shatter when struck by a sound at its natural frequency because the incoming wave amplifies the glass's own micro-vibrations. Likewise, once your consciousness ascends to a high vibrational frequency, whether through deep peace, alignment, awakening, or clarity, it becomes exquisitely sensitive, not fragile, but responsive. And here lies the hidden danger. Just as resonance can elevate, entrainment can pull downward. Negative entrainment happens when a stronger, lower frequency wave forces a higher frequency system to sink downward. This is why being around chaotic people, saturated negativity, gossip, emotional turbulence, or media designed to provoke fear can feel like a sudden drop in your energetic state. Your high-frequency consciousness begins to synchronize with the louder, denser frequency of the environment. The fall isn't personal, it's physics. To prevent this energetic hijacking, the principle of intentional limitation must be applied. And this has nothing to do with judging anyone or anything as low vibration. In scientific terms, low vibration simply corresponds to a state of lower energy and higher entropy. Static on a screen is not evil. It is simply disordered information. A television engineer doesn't condemn static. They filter it. They isolate it. They block it. You must now do the same. Your spiritual purpose, the next assignment, requires you to become an immaculate signal filter. This means deliberately restricting the inputs that collide with your consciousness. The sensationalist news cycle with its emotional spikes. The social environment is thick with unresolved drama. The repetitive conversations were rooted in the past. The digital noise is engineered to disrupt attention. Each of these is a low-frequency field capable of entrainment. By controlling these inputs, you construct a living Faraday cage around your consciousness, a protective barrier that prevents disruptive external fields from destabilizing your internal resonance. Engineers use Faraday cages to block electromagnetic interference from corrupting delicate signals. You are now building one energetically. This shield is not physical, it is behavioral, it is psychological, it is spiritual, and its purpose is singular, to preserve the coherence of your inner frequency. Because coherence, the consistent, stable vibration of an aligned consciousness, is the foundation of dimensional transition. The shift is not a magical leap or spontaneous transcendence. It is the sustained stabilization of your internal signal long enough for the vibrational phase change to occur. Just as water remains liquid until sustained heat triggers a state shift into vapor, your consciousness must sustain its elevated resonance until it surpasses the threshold that allows you to enter the new dimensional bandwidth. This is the true engineering behind the exit, a mastery of internal frequency, a disciplined rejection of interference, a continuously refined calibration of the self, and a profound understanding that awakening is not merely achieved, it is maintained. The dimensional shift is the natural outcome of vibrational coherence, sustained long enough to unlock the next level of cosmic operation. Point 6. The absence of the old battle. Prepare to embark on a fascinating journey into the esoteric concepts of spiritual advancement and the testing matrix, a term often used in metaphysical and spiritual philosophy, to describe the cycles of challenge and growth that shape the human experience. Imagine this matrix not as a punitive obstacle course, but as a meticulously designed evolutionary crucible, a dynamic system where consciousness refines itself through interaction with resistance, the very resistance embodied by your spiritual adversaries. These adversaries, often perceived as external forces or negative personalities, are, from a higher vantage point, the personalized energetic triggers necessary for the soul's alchemical transformation. They are not meant to destroy you, but to test the structural integrity of your developing awareness, forcing you to move beyond knee-jerk, fear-based responses. The crucial turning point you've described, the cessation of the familiar draining pattern, is rooted in the factual premise of energetic resonance. Physics tells us that everything is energy, vibrating at specific frequencies. When you are entangled in the old battle, your emotional and mental state is vibrating at a frequency that matches the adversary's, a frequency of reaction, fear, judgment, or need for validation. This mutual resonance is the grip the adversary holds. It's a vicious, cyclical feedback loop. Spiritually, success isn't about defeating the enemy on their terms. It's about altering your own energetic signature. The moment you cease to react or explain, you are literally changing your vibrational frequency. You are withdrawing the energy, the attention, the emotional investment that fueled the conflict. The adversary's energy, which relies on your resonance to maintain its power and presence in your life, suddenly has nothing to hook into. It's like unplugging a toxic appliance. The current simply stops. This profound, quiet shift is the essence of mastery and non-duality. Think of the Himalayan salt mine effect. In a low humidity, high saline environment, external pathogens cannot thrive. Similarly, when your inner environment, your consciousness, is elevated to a state of unscathed, non-reactive presence, the low-frequency energetic patterns of the old conflict cannot take hold. This is the factual evidence of spiritual sovereignty, the realization that you are the captain of your inner world, not merely a passenger tossed by external storms. The true, undeniable sign of your success is the silence in the old battleground. This silence is not the exhaustion of defeat, but the resonant stillness of an integrated lesson. The old trigger is pulled, but the familiar explosion of distress is replaced by a profound, almost boring neutrality. This unmistakable silence is the audible cue that the exit portal is not just visible, but opening wide. This portal signifies a transition from one matrix of learning, characterized by opposition and struggle, to a higher level matrix defined by flow, co-creation, and self-actualization. Factual spiritual teachings across diverse traditions, from Buddhism's concept of nirvana to Hermeticism's principle of mentalism, agree that freedom comes from the internal detachment from the world of form and opposition. The open portal is a shift in destiny's track, a graduation that makes the old challenging lessons obsolete. New, more complex, and ultimately more rewarding challenges will certainly arise, for growth never ceases. But the specific, draining pattern that once defined your struggle has been permanently transcended. You have effectively closed the book on that chapter of testing and stepped confidently onto a new, higher plane of experience, having earned your passage through the strength of your own silent, non-reactive victory. Point 7, the final act of forgetting. The journey of transformation, a narrative as old as human consciousness itself, culminates not with the roar of victory, but with a profound and often silent act of spiritual severance, the deliberate release of the struggle's memory. This is the most challenging final preparation for the individual we term the chosen one, a concept found across diverse mythologies and psychological frameworks, from Joseph Campbell's monomyth to Carl Jung's exploration of the self archetype. True success, the kind that fosters genuine, sustainable evolution, is only finalized when the victor no longer requires the narrative of their own suffering to validate their present strength. Factual human psychology, particularly in the study of trauma and post-traumatic growth, corroborates this, repeatedly reliving the narrative of the warrior. The identity forged in the crucible of conflict can inadvertently tether the individual to the past, creating a trauma bond with their own history. The final triumph is therefore not against an external foe, but against the internal gravity of a deeply entrenched, yet now obsolete, identity. The exit from the arena of struggle demands a conscious and specific transition, shedding the mantle of the warrior and fully embracing the identity of the guide or the builder. The warrior's power is reactive, defined by the challenge faced. The builder's power is proactive, defined by the vision being created. This shift is essential for unique, enduring leadership. A builder, unlike a perpetual warrior, conserves energy not for the next defensive skirmish, but for strategic, creative deployment. Historically, figures who transitioned successfully understood this principle. Think of George Washington refusing a kingship after winning the American Revolution, instead choosing to build the framework of a republic. He consciously released the story of the general to embody the story of the statesman. Had he remained the warrior, the resulting system would have likely been a military dictatorship, forever burdened by the conflict that birthed it. The lesson is captivatingly clear. The very weight of the victory, if carried into the future, becomes the greatest impediment to realizing the peace it secured. This final subtle act is about conscious neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. When a person constantly recounts their past struggles, they are, in effect, strengthening the neural pathways associated with stress, vigilance, and survival mode, a state known as hyperarousal. To become the guide or builder, the chosen one must instead dedicate their focus to forging new pathways associated with creation, equanimity, and future planning. This is the spiritual filling of the story. It doesn't mean denial of the past. It means reclassifying it from a current operational manual to an archived historical reference. The memory remains a source of wisdom, a library, but is no longer the active script being read in the present moment. This aligns with the ancient Stoic principle of pronoia, taking rational action based on foresight, rather than constantly reacting to past threats. The ultimate liberation lies in recognizing that strength is inherent, not defined by resistance. By fully turning consciousness towards the present moment, the chosen one steps into a state of unburdened capability. They are not merely survivors of a past battle, they are creators of a present reality. This presence is potent and specific. It allows the guide to perceive the current needs of their community without the filter of their past trauma, enabling decisions that are clear-sighted, not reactive. The builder can dedicate 100% of their mental bandwidth to innovation, unencumbered by the internal monologue of past pain or validation seeking. This final act is a demonstration of transcendence. The strength of the struggle is absorbed, metabolized, and transformed into an inner quietude, a stable foundation from which the real, lasting work of the Chosen One, that of leading, teaching, and creating, can finally begin. The warrior has won. Now the guide must be born from the silence that follows. The past is respected and filed away, and the future is embraced with a consciousness entirely dedicated to the moment's task. Chosen One, the confirmation is within you. You have navigated the complex maze of your own making, and the necessary trials placed before you. The spiritual alignment you have achieved is permanent, provided you honor this necessary transition. The exit is not a choice, but a consequence of your success. It is the divine momentum that carries the prepared vessel toward its greatest purpose. Do not look back. Do not question the calm. Trust the stillness that has arrived, for it is the sound of the universe preparing your next magnificent stage. Walk forward in this new reality. You are anointed, you are successful, and the time for your deployment is now.